Much of the conversation about the Biden administration's domestic agenda going forward is focused on a few key bills, especially infrastructure and his American Families Plan. But we're also facing in just a few weeks the proposed deadline for doing something about police reform. And so we want to touch base with that effort, see who's working on it and how likely it is to happen in the originally declared timeline. So we're very lucky to be joined on the show once again by senior reporter for Insider covering the Justice Department and federal courts. Camila Deschales joins us once again. Camila, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Very glad to have you back on. So you have a recent article breaking down the 16 key players, and it is really a bunch of people that range across the political spectrum. So who are some of the standout individuals that are working on this that you think are really going to help to shape whatever legislation comes out of this process?
Well, it's really across the board. I think a lot of people are focused on Congress, that they should be the senators, like Republican Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina or Karen Bass of California, who got her legislation on police reform passed through the House, and now everybody's kind of looking at her to see how she's going to participate in these Senate talks. But there's also a lot of outside forces that I don't think a lot of people take into account. Heads of police unions who really want to see more protections for police officers within the bill. You also have, activists within the Black Lives Matter movement who have also just played a really strong role in getting the topic of police brutality and police reform to the forefront of the national conversation. They also want a seat at the table. Like you look at lawmakers like Cori Bush of Missouri. She's a really key player who has stated very vocally that she will not support any legislation that comes her way if they have, the doctrine of qualified immunity that protects police officers from being sued. And she's stated off the bat that she would not support any type of legislation that would give those type of protections to police officers. So it's a very controversial issue, and you want to try to appease not only Republicans to get them to try to sign on the bill, but also Democrats who have, been supporting efforts on police reform for years.
Yeah, that is fascinating, and I certainly I'm glad that you acknowledge there's these different groups. Which obviously are going to fight for the things they want. But the idea that after a year of this social movement and the focus on Derek Chauvin's trial and all of that, like what would come out of it is we really need to provide some more protections to police officers. That feels a little bit disconnected from what people seem to want. But so you have obviously people with very different objectives as you've talked about. How much do we know about the current state of the bill? I mean, we've got 2 weeks until we're supposed to see it in theory. Is that looking likely at this point?
The conversations, especially on Capitol Hill, still remain ongoing. You hear a lot of reporters trying to ask lawmakers like Cory Booker, Tim Scott, Karen Bass, other key players on Capitol Hill about, what are things that they're willing to compromise on. And what we heard last week was Lindsey Graham saying that he was willing to compromise on certain measures like qualified immunity, but he still wants at least some type of protection for police officers. A really big thing that seems to have consensus on both Democrats and Republicans is that they both agree that there should be some type of national database where, people can report on crimes that are committed on police officers, or something, a database where they can kind of track if there was excessive use of force that police officers have used against civilians. And so that's been seemed to be the battleground. I think the biggest thing that they want to try to find is consensus on certain issues and what they both can see can be in the bill, and that's not going to be contentious. But the issue of qualified immunity and what protections do you give police officers and what don't you, or what efforts to kind of roll back some of the protections are still kind of a contentious issue.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out going forward which path they could take. I mean, the cynic in me says no matter what they put in the bill or no matter what they strip out of the bill, they're not going to find 10 Republicans that are going to sign on to virtually anything. I'm assuming that I am wrong going forward. So which do you think is more likely, that they're going to have a very narrowly tailored, very far from radical bill of police reform that could maybe get together 10 Republican senators? Or do they go for something bolder that actually reflects what activists have been pushing for, knowing that in the short term they might not be able to get the votes, but then use that to generate pressure going forward? Which is it looking like that might be?
It's looking like the easiest way for them to try to get some Republican support is to pass a more narrow bill. And so what that looks like is to be a little bit more moderate, something that maybe progressives will just deem as not enough or insufficient. And I think that's what we're kind of heading towards, is that they're trying to take apart key issues that was in the last House bill and try to put them in there and try to build some type of consensus to get that Republican support. President Joe Biden has been very clear that he wants to make this a top priority. He wants to get this done before the end of the month. And realistically, a lot of Democratic and Republican lawmakers have acknowledged that in order to really do that in this short time frame, they need to kind of pass a bill that can draw some Republican support, that can get the 10 Republican support, lawmakers to support it, that in order for it to actually pass in the Senate. But once it goes back to the House for another round of votes, they might, counter some issues with more progressive Democrats who may feel that, the bill doesn't include everything that it should.
Yeah, imagine, them putting together some bare bones bill that the Biden administration can point to and say, hey, look, we're doing something. And then you have Representative Bush, on TV every night talking about how it doesn't actually accomplish much. That would potentially hurt them. You mentioned Biden there. We haven't talked too much about him. You said that he's saying that this is going to be a priority. Is this something that over the past few weeks he's been talking about? Is he putting pressure on any of those key players that you've identified to craft the bill in any one of a few different ways? Is he actually involved in this process, I guess is what I'm asking.
From what we've been hearing, a lot of his advisors have been a part of the process. You have his senior advisor like Cedric Richmond, who was also a former congressman, that he's actively participating in these talks about criminal justice reform. And then you also have, his domestic counsel advisor, Susan Rice, who is also, weighed in on whether passing this bill was possible. And she's very optimistic that Congress can get something passed. This has been something that's been in the works for more than a year now. And Biden just really wants, and his administration want to see results, that Congress is committed to passing any type of legislation. And I think what's interesting here is that if they do pass this bill, that doesn't mean that it's the end, that more bills can be introduced to address different things when it comes to police reform. The topic itself is so huge, and there's so many areas in where you can reform policing practices. And so even if this is the one bill that gets passed this month, that doesn't mean this is the only bill that can be passed, months moving forward.
I agree. I don't know. Makes me nervous though. Generally, they like to say, "Hey, we're done with that." But you are right. It's not impossible. In any event, for anyone watching this who would like more information about, again, we've only narrowly touched on a few of the individuals that are working on this. Camila's article has 16 different key players. It's available right now at Insider with a lot of information about their background, what they might be pushing for, and you can really get a feel for how this process is about to play out if you read the article. Camila, as always, we appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.